Okay. There are still a few people joining us, but I think that we should probably get started because we really do have a packed agenda for today. So I just want to start by welcoming everybody to today's workshop, Becoming a Literacy Leader, Creating a Culture Shift Towards the Science of Reading. I'm Alicia Smith, and I am the president of the International Dyslexia Association Ontario branch. And I want to thank all of you for joining us tonight. It is amazing to see so many people who are excited to come out and talk about the science of reading on a beautiful August evening over the summer in your own time. So it's very exciting, and thank you all for joining us. Let me get my presentation moving. All righty. So our agenda for tonight, we're going to start off with the framework for this workshop series. So we're just going to go over the purpose and what has brought us all together to make sure that we're all on the same page. We're going to have a panel discussion with a group of fantastic educators from Winston Churchill Public School in Kingston, Ontario. Thank you to them for joining us. Following the panel discussion, we will have time for your questions for the panelists.
Okay.
So if you have questions for the panelists, I'd ask that you put them in the chat. I should have also asked that everyone mute themselves while you're in this main session. When you're in the breakout rooms, you can certainly unmute yourselves and discuss freely, but in the main session, if everyone could remain muted, it will just make the experience better for everyone. So if you do have questions, we have volunteers on hand. We have Stacy and we have Caitlin, our summer intern here, who are ready to answer your questions through the chat function. And they'll also be asking questions of the panelists for you. So if you have a question for the panelists, put it in the chat. And then finally, after the breakout rooms, we will be returning to this main session where we will have some final closing remarks, and we're having a prize draw, which is very exciting. We have done lots of webinars and things in the past, and we decided to make this one extra fun by offering prizes. And we also have digital goodie bags for everybody who's joining us tonight. So we have a folder that our panelist discussions and some of our volunteers have stuffed full of their favorite resources. We have some fun printables, we have some infographics, with some articles and some different things, just as a thank you for coming out and joining us tonight. So getting started with the goal of these workshops. We are here to connect educators who are interested in the science of reading. I know that we have people joining us tonight who are at all different levels of experience with the science of reading. Some of you, this might be even your first exposure. Others of you may have been learning about science of reading for the past 15 years, and that's amazing. And so it's just a wonderful opportunity to bring people together so that you can share your collective knowledge and wisdom and experience to really support each other in the journey of bringing the science of reading into schools. We're also here to celebrate success and to discuss challenges and strategies for overcoming those challenges. I have the amazing opportunity myself. It's one of the things I love the most about being in my role with IDA, is that I get to have wonderful conversations, probably 3 or 4 times a week, with educators right across Ontario who tell me about the amazing things that are happening in their schools. And it always just fills me with so much joy that I'm very excited that we can do this series so we can share some of those stories so that everybody can celebrate that success with them, and so that we also have an opportunity for all of you to share your own stories of success in those breakout rooms. But with those stories of success, there are also always discussions of challenges, and often I hear really interesting, creative ways that people have met those challenges and overcome those challenges. But I also speak with people all of the time that are still struggling with those challenges, and that's okay too. So this is a place where you can all come and share your own stories and support each other in overcoming those challenges. And finally, throughout the course of this workshop series, we're going to be working, our IDA Ontario volunteers that is, to create a roadmap for educators who are interested in implementing practices that are aligned with the science of reading, specifically in Ontario schools. So it will be, there'll be a lot of information that is applicable to those of you who are joining us from outside of Ontario, But the focus of this roadmap is going to be something unique because we don't really have anything like that for Ontario yet. So we've gathered a lot of information throughout the registration process, and we'll be gathering, we'll be asking you to help us gather some more information during the breakout sessions and through a follow-up survey at the end. And we'll be analyzing your responses and using them to create a document that we'll be sharing with all of you and that you can share with all of your friends that will provide some real concrete steps and ideas that people can use when trying to approach this and trying to make that shift within their school. So I, again, want to thank you all for participating in this, because I think that this resource that we're going to create together will be helpful in this movement that we're all trying to create in Ontario schools. So before we get too far into the discussion, I thought it would be really important that we first just talk a little bit about the definition of the science of reading. What do we mean by that? So that's a term that is sort of bouncing around everywhere these days. For the purpose of these workshops, we are going to use the definition that was created, I think it was started by the Reading League, but they assembled a very large group of educators, researchers, speech language pathologists, psychologists, and others who got together about a year ago now and worked to create a common definition, which they've put on their website, whatisthescienceofreading.org. You can go on there. And in addition to the definition of the science of reading, they also have sort of a pledge that you can sign on that you agree with this definition. So far, they have over 7,000 people that have agreed with their specific definition. And I personally think it's a very good one. So this is the definition that they have put forward. The science of reading is a vast interdisciplinary body of scientifically based research about reading and issues related to reading and writing. They go on to say that the research has been conducted over the last 5 decades across the world and is derived from thousands of studies conducted in multiple languages. The science of reading has culminated in a preponderance of evidence to inform how proficient reading and writing develop, why some have difficulty, and how we can most effectively assess and teach, and therefore improve student outcomes through the prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. I think that's the really important piece there, the prevention of and intervention for reading difficulties. They also go on to say what the science of reading is not. I think this is also an important sort of framework for our discussion. It is not an ideology or philosophy, a fad, trend, new idea, or pendulum swing, a political agenda, a one-size-fits-all approach, a specific program of instruction, or any one specific component of instruction, such as phonics. Now, I just wanted to put this out there at the beginning of this conversation to just acknowledge that the way that we teach kids to read is something that has been very hotly contested for a very, very long time. And that's okay. And I think that it's important to recognize that everybody on all sides of that debate really at the heart of it are passionate about kids and they're passionate about children's literacy, as we are all here on a beautiful Sunday or beautiful summer evening because we are passionate about literacy. I think we should never lose sight of that. That's something that is the common ground that we need to maintain in all of our discussions. Now, the good news, what we know so far from our registration survey for tonight, this is very exciting. We had 607 people register for our workshop series. This number was as of sometime this morning. I think we actually have more people registered, but I think that is just fantastic. And it just speaks to the momentum that we're building here in Ontario with people who are interested in evolving to evidence-based practices. And I just think that's fantastic. Now, we had registrants from right across Canada, and we also had some international registrants, and there you are all welcome here. But we did look at the subset that were from Ontario as well, because the focus here is on Ontario schools. And we had individuals register from 45 different school boards or school authorities from Ontario, which I think is just fantastic. So it says that in 45 different school boards across Ontario, we have people who are excited about the science of reading and are ready to become leaders in their boards to bring about the changes that we need to improve outcomes for all children. So that's amazing. The other thing we asked, we asked some questions of all of you in the registration form. One of the questions that we asked was if you could tell us, have you been seeing any positive change in your board? And if so, what positive changes have you seen? And I was thrilled when we analyzed the results and we found that 87% of you could say that yes, you are seeing some positive changes in your school boards. That is fantastic. There was only 9% had seen little or no change, and then we did have some people who chose not to respond. But again, this just speaks to the momentum that we have here. I know there's been so much going on in Ontario with the Right to Read inquiry, and that this has really sparked the interest of a lot of people. And schools and school boards and teachers and speech language pathologists and psychologists are all responding and rising to the challenge. And that is amazing. Wonderful. Another question that we asked during the registration, which is, I found the responses to this one very interesting as well, was we asked, how did you first learn about the science of reading? So if we're starting a movement, obviously we want people to learn about the science of reading. So discovering how you got here is an important insight into how we can get more people interested in this. So we analyzed those responses and we made this word cloud, but out of this, we do have some actual statistics as well. So overwhelmingly, the most popular way that people learned about the science of reading, or that you indicated you learned about the science of reading, was through simple word of mouth. Over 30% of you said that it was a colleague, another teacher, a speech language pathologist, some mentioned a principal or a superintendent, even a psychologist, who first informed you about the science of reading and got you interested in it. So that's amazing. Another very common response was that people were learning about it through professional learning opportunities. And specific ones that were mentioned were, a lot of people mentioned that within their school board over the past year, they had been able to attend some sort of optional PD session about the science of reading. A lot of people mentioned those are being led by speech language pathologists. In other places, they're being led by teachers. And that's fantastic to hear. Others mentioned having taken online courses or having sought out professional development opportunities, and that's where they were learning about it. So that was 17% of respondents. That was great. The next top way was through social media. 16% of you said that you first learned about the science of reading on Facebook. So that is interesting. Kudos to all of you that are sharing science of reading posts on your Facebook page. Please keep up the good work. That's amazing. We had another 13% learned about the science of reading through their own personal experience. So we heard a lot of stories of teachers who learned about the science of reading to help one specific child, often their own child. Other times it was taking a job in special education and realizing that there were some students that they couldn't reach, and then going and doing their own personal research. But only 7% of respondents said that they learned about the science of reading at university. And we broke those respondents out even further. And we discovered that the majority of those that learned about the science of reading in university were speech language pathologists, not teachers. The teachers who responded saying that they learned about it in university, the majority of those learned about it in graduate school. So we only had, out of our 607 or something responses, only 8 individual people said that they learned about the science of reading in their undergrad education. So clearly that's something we need to work on. And I'm hoping that with the Right to Read inquiry, there will be some changes there in undergrad. But in the meantime, you're all doing a fantastic job of talking about the science of reading with other teachers. And that, I think, is going to be the key for getting this information out, is to keep doing that sort of thing. So kudos to you. If we were all together, I would clap for you, and I would encourage you all to clap for each other as well, because I think you're doing a fantastic job. So I'm very excited for tonight's panel discussion with our teachers from Winston Churchill Public School, which is in Kingston, Ontario. So the teachers at Winston Churchill first came to my attention, I want to say 3 years ago now, when I first met Emily Moorhead. She presented at the very first IDA conference that I attended, and I was just so taken with her enthusiasm and her passion for what she does, and her amazing way of modeling and showing and sharing what structured literacy really looks like in a really approachable and friendly way. So that is when I first approached Emily, and I have been in touch with her ever since. And she has done some amazing workshops for us, she's done a lot of teacher education. And her team at Winston Churchill now have been doing summer learning together all summer. They've been working through an online course together. And she has some other amazing educators at her school that it sounds like the school has really come together. So I'm thrilled that I can introduce Emily Moorhead, Hayley Johnston, and Laura Lamarche from Winston Churchill Public School in Kingston, Ontario. But first, we have a message from their principal, Gemma, who was unable to join us tonight. She wanted to join us, but she is on vacation. But fortunately, Gemma did send us a little video.
Hello, everyone. My name is Gemma Zelmanovitz, and I'm a principal with the Limestone District School Board. I currently lead a small school of 250 students. Prior to becoming a school administrator 6 years ago, I taught for 17 years, the last 10 being at the kinder and primary level. I chose to focus my career at this level because I absolutely love teaching kids to read. I loved the incredible moment when a student would sit with me and realize that they could decipher the marks on the page into something meaningful. It was like a whole world was opening up just for them. And so, like many teachers, I felt deeply frustrated and saddened when I couldn't help a student make progress with their reading. Despite following what I had been taught were best practices, there were always a few students that needed something else. I did what I thought would help, but now that I've been digging into the science of reading, and I know better. And I want to work with others to ensure that all children are equipped with the literacy skills to become lifelong learners and have the experience of that moment that opens up the world. 2 years ago, I began to hear about structured literacy. The student support teacher at my previous school shared snippets of her learning, and of course, my curiosity was piqued. All administrators were once teachers and continue to care deeply about instruction, learning, and student success. When I came to my current school, I was blessed with another educator, Emily, who is passionate about the science of reading. Emily's knowledge and enthusiasm has prompted my staff to become more curious about structured literacy and begin shifting their teaching methods. We are just scratching the surface, but each step along the way is exciting and a step forward. This summer, almost all of my teaching staff and many of my support staff have chosen in their own time to dig into structured literacy through an online course. We gather after each module and discuss our learning, our wonderings, our questions about applying our learning with the students in our school. I too am taking this course and feel that learning alongside my staff is critical to our journey. With school funds, I was able to partially subsidize the course for those interested. It feels exciting to collaborate with a group so willing to learn, to take risks, and to encourage each other to do the same. As we begin another school year, I will continue to support my staff to move forward in the very best way possible through continued professional development for myself and my staff, through lots of formal and informal conversations and observation opportunities, and most importantly, by listening to their concerns, successes, and learning on a daily basis so that I can work to remove barriers and develop the structured literacy approach in my school.
So thank you, Gemma, for sending that in. If you see this recording, appreciate that. Now I'm going to invite our panelists for today, Emily, Hayley, and Laura, to unmute yourselves. And we're going to start with the series of questions. So I'm going to start by asking each of you to just introduce yourself briefly and let us know your current role in the school and how long you've been teaching. So maybe we can start with Emily.
Sure. I'm Emily Moorhead, and I've been teaching 17 years, most of them in kindergarten, and I still teach kindergarten now. So I've been at Winston Churchill. This will be my 4th year, I think, and I just keep doing what I do in kindergarten. It's a great spot to be, and this staff has been so great to work with. So it's been really a really positive experience.
Thanks, Emily. Hayley, how long have you been teaching, and what is your current role?
So I currently will be teaching grade 3-4. For the past couple years, I've been teaching grade 3, and that's pretty much around grades 2 to 4. I've kind of bopped around. I've been teaching for 13 years, and about 9 to 10 of that has been like full time within a school. So
Perfect. Thank
the
you.
last 3 at Winston.
Great, thanks. And Laura, how long have you been teaching, and what is your current role at Winston?
Hi, I have been teaching for going on 17 years. I'm currently the student support teacher, which is like the special education resource teacher. We call it the SST in our board. And in this role for the last 5 years.
Amazing. So I'm going to ask you each a few questions. Emily, let's start with you. Could you let us know how you first learned about the science of reading? What brought you here?
So I started to learn about the science of reading when my own son was in SK in grade 1 and not learning how to read. He was later diagnosed with dyslexia, but it was several years after that we really started to dig into that. I was very fortunate because around the time that he was really struggling, I also was teaching an SK in grade 1 combined class. And when he started to get some intervention and support, I was also able to do a teacher workshop at the same time from a reading clinic in Kingston, the Reading Clinic. And that let me sort of keep my learning happening so that I could support my son at home. But I also found very quickly that I could use those same skills and tools with my whole class at school. And I could really see some positive growth and change with my kids. And so that would have been, he's 16 now. So that was 10 years ago. And I've been going strong ever since and sort of adding more to what I do to keep moving forward.
That's amazing. I love how you took what you learned to help your own child and were able to bring that into the classroom. Absolutely. To help all of your learners. That's fantastic. And Hayley, how did you first learn about the science of reading?
When I first came to Winston Churchill, I was doing the planning time role. And so I would do planning time for Emily's class. And so I would come in typically at the end of a code lesson and sit on the carpet with students and just be amazed at what she was teaching and how she was teaching it, and looking around thinking, I didn't know some of this. Like, what do you mean that's we use the soft C in this case and a hard C in that case? And I just got really interested in it and asked lots of questions to Emily, and moved into the grade 3 role the next year, and really tried in to see how I could implement it for my bigger people.
That's fantastic. So again, that word of mouth and having one passionate person in your building can really inspire other educators. And Laura, how about you? How did you first learn about the science of reading?
I just want to say, I don't know if my internet connection is good or not. Can you hear me okay? I'm good? Okay. So yeah, most of the early part of my teaching career was in junior intermediate. And then I got placed into a kindergarten class at Winston Churchill. And I really felt out of my element with the literacy. And there were some teachers at my school that were taking courses at a place in Kingston called the Reading Clinic. So I signed up for a course there, and it was, I think it was like specifically kindergarten, structured literacy in the kindergarten classroom. And actually Emily was teaching part of the course. And that was before she was at our school. So I was introduced to both Emily and structured literacy at the same time. And yeah, from there, it was really just, one course I just started to learn about it. And then when Emily moved to our school and I changed into my role as student support teacher, a big part of my job is supporting students who are struggling with reading. And Emily's first year, I worked very closely with a student in her class and was able to just be in her class a lot and watch what she was doing with structured literacy. And that just, like, seeing the growth there just really inspired me and kind of shook me, like, okay, I got to learn more about this. I need to be doing more of this.
That's amazing. So I love you had both the professional development opportunity living in Kingston where the reading clinic is, and they have those courses. And then also the luck of having Emily nearby as well, having somebody in your vicinity who was passionate and excited and a couple steps ahead of you on the learning journey. So that's fantastic. Yeah. So when I'm speaking with teachers, which I love doing, if anybody here wants to reach out to me, please do. One of the things that I always love hearing about is like your big aha moment, because for everyone, it seems like there's a moment or a few moments where you're starting to learn about the science of reading, and then all of these other things that you've known or experienced or seen just sort of all click together. So I want to ask you all if there's a specific moment or moments you could share with us that were big eye openers for you. So again, I'll start with you, Emily, if you don't mind.
Yeah. For me, the aha at the beginning was that I thought I knew what I was doing. And then I had my little kid at home who had every opportunity to learn and was surrounded by literacy. We had read to him forever and he knew all kinds of books, and he seemed like he was going to have a nice easy time and cruise right into kindergarten. And then when that didn't happen, it felt really shocking. It hurt my soul. And moreover, it hurt my soul that I couldn't help him. And my husband kept saying, well, you're a teacher, help him. And I don't know how to help him. I don't know what to do, because I didn't have the skills and I didn't have the tools. And so it was big to learn something that worked. And I did that little teacher workshop in the summer, and Aiden started going for intervention in September. And I came home from the first day of the teacher workshop and had learned about making a code pack, which is just letters on cards so that we could practice those sounds and move them around and get really fluent with them. And he learned, I think, 12 letters that very first day and was quite keen right from the first day. And I thought, oh, well, this is different, because he had been really resistant. He used to sweat when he was reading because it was so difficult and so much work. And he kind of gave it a go, and you could see the change. And then similarly, the sort of aha happened all over again when I went to school, and that same idea worked with a whole classroom full of kids. So it didn't need to be one-on-one, and it didn't need to be in an intervention setting and really, really intense. It was 4 or 5 minutes in kindergarten, and the kids were picking it up and learning to write things and learning to sound out words and learning to read and learning to spell. And it was mind-boggling that I thought, how did I not know? How many years have I gone teaching these kids and not known or done any of this? And I can remember kids that I didn't reach before I knew this. I remember their names. They sort of hang around in my soul a bit, but you can only do what you know. And so I'm glad I know now.
I think that's so important, and that's always important to acknowledge as well. I hear that from a lot of teachers, and I think I love the slogan, you know better, do better. Know better, do better. I love that. Just moving forward and doing what we can. Absolutely, always learning. That's great. And Hayley, do you have any big aha moments from your learning journey that really stick out for you?
I think the biggest one that always sticks out for me is going into Emily's classroom and finding out there were all these rules. Like, I had always taught vowel teams and I taught phonics, but I didn't know why certain things made a certain sound when some of those things were used, and it felt like a real, like, why don't I know this, and why aren't we telling people this, and why aren't we telling students this? And it just felt like some big secret that, and I couldn't figure out why we wouldn't be using this more often. I mean, like, I didn't know about it, so again, know better, do better, but it just seemed like a big secret. And I think it's great that, like, we're teaching this to children now, because I can see it on their face. I see it on the faces of people I just talked to who are adults who are like, I'm sorry, why do we put a silent E there? Why? And and it's amazing. And so I think it's so important to give the tools to kids to use, because they need them just like we do.
Yeah, absolutely. I know learning some of those spelling generalizations and the different morphological patterns as well, like through having a dyslexic child, my spelling has improved. It's still bad as a dyslexic adult, but I finally started to see some of the logic that just escaped me for, my entire life. So those are really interesting things. And they're interesting too, like learning them, it's not dry and boring, it's actually really kind of fascinating. And Laura, do you have a specific aha moment that stands out for you that you'd like to share?
I have a few, and they keep continuing to happen. But if I go back to sort of the first, would definitely be that first year in Emily's classroom and working with a particular student who was very literacy avoidant, everything avoidant, and just seeing the buy-in and the excitement and the growth with just doing a simple code hack with him, that I would say was really my first aha moment. From there, there's a podcast that I listened to last year called Educate, and there was one particular episode that just really impacted me, and some of the teachers at our school as well. We've talked about it. It was called, what was it called, Emily?
It was Emily Hanford, What the Words Say.
Oh no, it was the other one. It was the
At a loss for words?
At a loss for words, yeah, that was the first one. Mm-hmm.
And just listening to the one person that they were interviewing describe how she had coped through school, kind of faking that she could read, and learning that when she had a child who was also struggling to read, learning that the things that teachers were teaching were actually the coping skills that she was using as a struggling reader, not actually helping her child or herself learn to read. And that just really was oh my gosh, we need to do better. And it just kind of set me okay, I got to dive into this. Yeah.
That's a fantastic podcast. And I see Emily put the name there in the chat. I can't see the whole chat right now, but if somebody else could put the link in there in the chat for anybody who hasn't seen that, it's a great thing to share with other educators as well as just an entry point. And she actually has a series. There's 4 podcasts about reading that Emily Hanford has done as part of the Educate series, and they're all really, really good.
Really awesome.
Which would be great for sharing.
Listened to that one, At a Loss for Words, as I was setting up my classroom in August and September 2019, and I can remember the grade 1 teacher from down the hall popped in just to say hello and see how things were going when I was setting up my room. And I said, you have to listen to this. Go to your classroom and work on it and listen while you, and she probably ran back down the hall 8 times to say, I can't believe this. I can't believe what I'm hearing. And I said, I know. And then she'd go back and we do the same thing over and over again. We couldn't get enough of it. I think I listened to it 3 or 4 times. My mom came to help one night and she and I were listening to it again. I said, you have to hear it. You won't believe it. So it's really powerful.
It is. It is a very powerful one. There are a ton of fantastic science of reading podcasts available now. I love to just put my earbuds in and go for a walk and listen. So there's the Amplify Science of Reading podcast, which is really fantastic. Obviously the Emily Hanford ones. There's also the Reading League has a podcast, which interviews a lot of really amazing people. And then there was a very short one that I listened to recently that was from The Measured Thumb. Did you listen to those ones? Those are very short. So not a big commitment of time. You can read them while you're driving to the store to pick up milk or something, but nicely done, good explanations. She does a great job of summarizing things. So when I'm talking to teachers as well, especially people who are new to the science of reading and are just starting to learn that some of the practices that they've been participating in for a long time really don't align with what the evidence says about how children learn to read, it can be very overwhelming and people really don't know where to get started with making changes. So I was wondering if I could ask each of you if you could just share with our audience one small change or the first small change that you made within your own classroom to give people an idea of maybe where they can get started. So again, Emily, we're going to get started with you.
So that first year, once I started to do some learning with my son at home and also then implementing some things in my classroom as well, I did a few things right away, and they were all sort of based around this very tiny little lesson. I would do a quick review of all the letters I had taught so far. So I taught one letter on the first day, and the next day I had a second letter, and we practiced and we worked on the sounds of those letters, and we worked on how to print those letters, and we worked on using them and hearing them in speech and hearing them in words and hearing them at the beginning or endings of words. So that is a code pack. So it's just little letters on cards. It's not fancy. My cards are color coded, so my vowels are yellow and my consonants are white, but we just sort of bang away at those. And then also the spelling side. So we would always practice those sounds, and we'd always practice with me saying the sounds and the children printing the letters. And that was really all at the beginning. So within that lesson, I was able to really work on phonological and phonemic awareness. So what sound do you hear at the beginning of the word sun? What can you write that letter down that you hear at the beginning of sun? Can you write down the sound that you hear at the end of the word fish? Oh, that one's tricky because it's a digraph, but we sort of learned all of those pieces, but we just kind of worked away, and really like 5 or 10 minutes a day at the most. And those children in that class were mostly reading by the time they left kindergarten, and it has never like I've never stopped then, because it was so powerful so quickly that I would never let that go again. At the beginning, I used to have to close my door because we weren't really doing phonics like that. We were doing a lot of reading comprehension work and comprehension strategies, and I was still doing all of those things, but I just added this little piece, and it was thrilling to watch the change happen because the kids could actually read some things on their own and then apply those comprehension strategies to something they could read and not just what I could read for them.
That's amazing. And I love how you emphasize the importance of the spelling and the writing that you included in as well, as opposed to just doing oral work or just doing reading. You're also making sure that you spend a lot of time and emphasis on spelling. So breaking those sounds apart and then writing the sounds
really
down.
Recognizing that learning those letter sounds and learning to sort of spell the sounds are reciprocal skills. They're working on the same thing from two different points. And that was really powerful. The other thing that I learned and then found really astounding was that it didn't have to be words. It could be, we could learn to read single sounds, and then we could learn to read just two sounds together and work on blending and work on segmenting just two sounds. So it didn't always feel like teachers and adult readers want to jump to words like cat and hat and dog and fish, but in fact, it doesn't need to be three sounds. It can be two to start. And that was a big leap. And like really, I would never have thought of that, I don't think, on my own, but it made a huge difference. And you could see the skills developing. And once those two sounds were easy, three sounds became way easier too. And so that was big.
That's amazing. That's great advice, especially when you're working in the kindergarten setting. Like, it can be overwhelming for kids. Even a word like dog, it's, 3 letters, that can be a big
lot to look at.
It's a lot. So it's
well, and I think too, like recognizing that in kindergarten, they're not struggling readers yet. They're all just beginning readers. And that's a really nice spot to be starting, because I'm not trying to remediate kids. I'm just introducing for the first time. So it's gentle and it's playful and it's fun and it's minutes a day, like really low key.
That's amazing. Yeah, I love that you make it developmentally appropriate and can integrate it within the play-based. That's fantastic. And Hayley, you're working with older kids. So where did you start in your changes in your practice?
So I started really small. During my small group time for my students who were struggling readers, I would use code packs and often bend the ear of Emily to be like, okay, what's my next step? Like, what should we be doing next? And and always got great advice. So then the next summer, I decided to take Top 10 Tools. And that was it was a big course with lots of information. And I knew that if I didn't pick just like 2 or 3 things, then I wasn't going to do any of it. So I just picked 2 or 3 things that I thought that I could implement in the classroom. So I chose the See, Think, Wonder, which is I put an image up on the board every morning, and the kids come in and we talk about what we see, what we think, what we wonder. And it really built their oral language skills, which translated into reading responses and writing and explaining their thinking in math, and explain their thinking in science, and explain their thinking in social studies, because they had that practice of thinking and so I tell them it's my favorite word. I put it on a mug. It's in big letters in the classroom. And so that really helped to build their language skills there. And then the other thing that I did was, at least once a week, we did a whole class code lesson where I would hand out whiteboards, and we would try spelling words with long I, IGH, or we would start learning about suffixes, and when do we use ing, and when do we double letters, and I would pick a rule ahead of time and go through looking at patterns in language, which helps my students who need those rules, but also helped my students who didn't necessarily need those rules, but really helped to improve their spelling, because they were like, oh, I hear the T sound at the end of jumped, and I've been writing JUMPT all this time, but now I know that it happened before, so I'd add the ED. But so working through those little rules along the way. And I found a really great resource for that was the ABCs and All Their Tricks. Is just a little orange book, and it is an easy resource, so that if you're like me and you get up in front of the class and you can't remember which words, like any examples of words, they all just leave your brain, you can just pick up your handy dandy little tool and turn to that page. And then this year I've done the Big Dippers with the rest of my colleagues, and so I will be picking a couple different things. I haven't quite wrapped my head around yet which ones I wanted to do, but I'll be picking 2 or 3 more things to implement, so that it's not I'm not completely overwhelmed, because I feel like I've done past taken a PD and then felt like I have to do it all, and you don't have to do it all. You just have to pick things and start.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, right? Like, pick a couple of things that you know you can do, and then add more gradually as you're learning and as you're becoming more confident in that role. And I love that you talked about that the oral language warm up that you do every day. So often when we're talking about implementing the science of reading, we're focusing on that decoding aspect, and maybe which is very important, obviously. But we also need to have an approach to oral language as well that talks about the importance of that. So it's amazing that you have that activity, and also great that you're doing that, still doing the decoding work and the spelling work with your older students, and in bringing in the morphology, which is a fantastic thing to bring into classrooms all the way through, basically. So that's amazing. And Laura, where did you get started? You're in a student support role, so your practice is a little bit different. So I'm sure there are lots of people who are curious to know where you started.
Yeah, it was moving into the role of student support teacher was a big learning curve for me. And I think, like, literacy wise, I really started small. So having been in Emily's class, I started working with code packs, and that was like kind of my first step into bringing it into school, or like into my reading groups, was using code packs, and also learning articulation of the letter sounds. So yeah, and from there, just doing PD. So the Top 10 Teachers course was amazing, and the Big Dippers one that we're doing right now has been incredible. Also, really for me, wrapping my head around the importance of the diagnostic assessments that we were doing, the screeners that we had available at our board, and how to sort of, and they were really good ones actually. And once I knew how to use them properly, it really helped me target how I was using the code packs in the beginning. Yeah, and I also have so much to say about this. I also like, I was lucky when I first jumped into this role that I had the primary phonics like curriculum and some decodable books that went along with it. And I had been introduced to that already at the reading course that I took at the reading clinic. So that was really helpful at the beginning. I just kind of was turning pages and learning as I went. And then the really other big piece for me was just slowing down and not just like trying to get my reading groups to like do all these things in our small sessions, but really like slowing it down, and sometimes just starting with phonological awareness and just oral stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where I started.
That's fantastic. Thank you. I love that you mentioned the importance of assessment and diagnostic assessment, and learning about what was available to you and how to use those and how to really take that information, because there's such a wealth of information that is available, either through assessments that may be kicking around in people's school boards and they haven't been using them or they're not aware of them, or other ones that you can find online. There's a lot of great free ones. We just finished last week a 4-morning workshop with Margie Gillis all about screening and assessment. It was fantastic. That's available if for anyone here who didn't attend, you can actually purchase the recording of that one after the fact. We got permission from her to keep that one around. But it was a very informative workshop for anybody who's interested in learning more about assessment. So it's great to hear about the changes that you've all made in your individual classrooms. But I mean, the reason that I invited you here today is because it's not just 1 or 2 people off in their rooms with their door closed making changes. I've been hearing about all sorts of amazing stuff that's been going on at Winston Churchill forever. Everything from like teachers staying after school to eat cookies and talk about the science of reading that Emily baked, or standing out in the pouring rain for half an hour to continue discussing the root of a word or the base of a word. So I want to ask each of you, like, in your opinion, how has the culture of your school changed? Like, so the changes that you've all been implementing in your classroom and the learning you've been doing together, how has that just impacted you as a team, a school team? And again, we'll start with you, Emily.
Okay. So the changes have been incredible. Like our school feels all on board. We have families who are keen and interested, and parents who are asking questions, and kids who run outside at the end of the day to tell what new piece of code they learned, or what vocabulary word. I had kids, we talked about the word scrumptious when we read a book, and challenged my kindergarten kids to tell their family members that some part of their meal that night at dinner was scrumptious, and they thought that was hilarious. So it's sort of pulling our community along with us. And then really in our hallways at school, the teacher talk that happens is really interesting, because we're now popping in to ask really specific questions. We're relying on each other for support for kids. And when we're not sure, like, oh, I'm seeing this kid who always, decodes the word and sounds like it's going to be right, and then the first sound they say is the last sound of the word. Like, what is going on, and why is that happening, and what should I do? And because we're kind of all on board together, we have ideas, and we have resources, and we have books, and we have suggestions, and we're interested in finding out so that we can learn a bit more and kind of move all of us forward. And so the dialogue that happens just on the fly in the hallway, we might chit chat about other things, but we also often will loop back around to, oh my gosh, you won't believe what happened, or one of our kids just suddenly learned how to read, or whatever. Those things are happening all the time too. And we did indeed have cookies after school right before our job action started in 2019. And so until we were no longer meeting in person, because we were working to rule, we had after school sessions and sat around, and Alicia was under the impression that perhaps people were bribed with cookies, but Laura would say we were bribed with resources because people wanted to know and were kind of keen and interested in what was happening. And I happened to have some resources because I've been working on this longer than the other people at our school. So I said, oh, well, let me show you. Let's decompose a Dolch list and figure out which words are actually decodable on that list. Or let's, look together at how these spelling patterns work and how they can be useful for kids or whatever. So we sort of started with just a little group of primary teachers, but then it was trickling into other teachers as well. And we do tend to end up standing in the parking lot in the rain talking about some random little bit of some kind of science of reading tidbit that maybe would have been totally obsolete to everyone before, but now none of us can stop talking about it. It's just become the culture in our school to analyze and discuss and talk about our literacy and talk about moving our kids forward. And it's been really quite a thrill. I worked on this for a long time by myself, back when no one else was interested and at my other schools, when no one else was interested and no one really cared what was happening in kindergarten that much, as long as the kids were happy and playing and fine. And now to have this community of educators who want to know and want to look at, they want to see the writing that's happening in kindergarten, and it feels so exciting to know that it's starting to not just be in kindergarten, it's starting to move out into the bigger world in Winston.
That's amazing. And I saw Laura and Hayley like nodding and smiling, and so clearly they agree with everything that you said. It sounds like Winston Churchill is actually a really fun place to work right now. I mean, it's been such a difficult 2 years with COVID and the job action that happened before that. To see how enthusiastic your team is right now at this time is really amazing. I've been watching Emily's posts on Twitter and seeing you guys all sitting in somebody's backyard. It's beautiful. I don't know whose it is.
In person sometimes is really nice right now.
Discussing the learning that you're doing during Top 10 Tools, or not Top 10 Tools, sorry, Big Dipper's course that you're doing.
Those meetings have been neat because we've had in-person people and we've had people on a screen. So we just have a laptop sitting sort of close by, and the people on the screen can listen. And my teaching partner often will send me a text message to say, Jen has her hand up or Lauren has her hand up, so that we can keep those people on the screen in the loop as well. So we're learning that hybrid teaching might not be our favorite thing, but we're also learning that it's doable to work together in person and on a screen at the same time. And that's been really great because it's allowed people who maybe otherwise wouldn't have been able to join those sessions to stay in the loop and learn along with us, which has been great.
That's amazing. And it just shows the motivation of everyone to do this together and to be included. So that's fantastic. And I loved from Gemma's opening message that she's taking the course with you, yes, which I think is so incredibly important, to have your principal right in there with you doing the learning. And so she can support you and really understands what you're talking about.
Been really neat. And she had said from the get-go that she thought there was money to subsidize a little bit. And she said, just send me the list of people, and those people will have to present at staff meetings in September. So we, learn from you or whatever. And when I handed her the list, it was 17 educators from our school. And she said, oh, I was thinking 5 or 6. And I said, I know, but everybody's in. And so that was really exciting too. It was not just a tiny little core of teachers. And it was really a lot of us who wanted to learn more, and EAs at our school who wanted to be in the mix, because they said, we work with kids and we work on reading with kids, and we need to know what they're learning so that we can help them too. So it was really exciting.
That's fantastic.
Still really exciting.
And Hayley, would you want to jump in and talk about the changes that you've seen at Winston?
Yeah, I think when I first came to Winston, everyone was very welcoming, and they're a group of really collaborative people. And even though we're just starting kind of as a group moving into the science of reading and structured literacy, they were always around to help. And I think that's kind of how this snowballed into it, because that's just who they were as people anyways. But it's awesome because it opens up a new world of not only learning, but resources. Like I can go to Laura and ask for some decodable texts and know that she has them, or I can go to Emily and ask for resources for students who are working at a lower level than the grade 3 level. And so it's been really helpful there as well. It's not just knowledge, but it's also those resources. And I think that can be a really overwhelming thing of where to start. When starting something new, is not knowing what you're going to use to teach those things. And so that's been really helpful as well.
That's true. In the registration questions, we did ask people about the barriers that they're experiencing, and difficulty in finding resources was one of the most popular, if not the most popular answer, was simply that, you know, we can't get our hands on decodable texts, or we don't have access to the assessments that we need, these sorts of things. So it's great that you're in a building where people have those. I wonder what you would say, though, to an educator who's working in a building that doesn't have this big community around them. Do you have any advice for them, Hayley?
I would say start. So Emily was once someone in a building that didn't have a bunch of people on her team. Like Emily has said she's been doing this for years. Laura has said she's been doing this for years. And so we're all slowly starting to see how it's working and the impact it's having on our students. And those students are going to move on. And when those students move on, those teachers are going to go, oh, you know A, B, C, and D. And how do you know that? And, oh, I didn't know that. And that's going to make an impact on your colleagues as well. So they may not be ready to come around yet, but eventually that ball will get rolling. And it's a ball that Emily and then Laura were pushing, and then, you know, Jen was pushing, and then I was pushing, and now we're all pushing it, but we weren't all pushing it together to start. So just start with something small, but start.
Well, and I would say, just to jump on your back there, Hayley, that really that starting by yourself feels hard and feels scary, but there's so little pressure when you're on your own that you just, any little change you make is going to be great. And what starts to happen is that parents start to notice a difference, and your colleagues, so say the teacher who gets your kids the next year notices that, oh wow, those kids already know how to read, or whatever. Like those things start to happen, and it gets people interested. I had a parent once, I was going to teach grade 1 the following year, and a little parent of twins in JK said, we really want Mrs. Moorhead for SK, but if we can't have Mrs. Moorhead, we'll take anybody with a code pack. And it was that idea, like the parents got on board because they could see their children making progress, and they could see ways to help their kids at home. And so it was quite powerful. And I didn't get to teach those kids again, but it was that sort of, that question keeps popping up, what is a code pack, over and over and over again on the chat. So I'm just going to do like a 2-second demonstration. So a code pack is just a set of letters on cards. We introduce them in kindergarten. I introduced them one at a time. With older kids, you could introduce a little set together, so a vowel and 5 or 6 consonants, and then teach children how to work and read with them. So every day we do a quick review of the sounds that are on our cards. First, by having the kids, I just hold them up and the kids read the sounds. And so they'd say k, and they'd say ing, and they'd say all, and they'd say n, and we'd flip through that pack. And at the beginning, it's really fast, and then it gets to be longer as the pack gets fatter, but we don't necessarily have to review every time. And then I turn my code pack around and I say, oh, the next sound is S. Can you write it down? And so the children then have a piece of chalk or a whiteboard, and they write down that sound on their board. And then we start to use them to do little words. So let's put 2 sounds together and see what would happen if we had, it's hard. I'll go this way, but then we put two sounds together and the kids would say the short O sound, ah, and the J sound, j, and they would blend those two together. And then we would do the same thing with spelling. So we just use them as a tool, the same way you could use magnetic letters or whatever, but cards are really easy to flip and easy to hold on to. And so you don't purchase them, you make them.
Yeah. Who's interested in the code packs?
I know, they're interesting. So I'll add a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, Emily has recorded 3 full webinars for us. They're an hour each, where she goes through how she uses those code packs in her kindergarten classroom. And in addition to that, we have another 2 hours of webinars, 2 one-hour webinars that were recorded by Jan McLean, who is from the Kingston Reading Clinic, who I believe taught Emily and Laura. And she also goes through how to create the code packs. With that webinar, there's a printable, a free printable you can download that has the letter cards. You can just print them out. And she also has some checklists and the order that you can introduce the letters in and that sort of thing. It's very interesting. There's a lot that we could go into there. But I did want to give Laura a chance to jump in as well. She hasn't had a chance to talk about the changes that she's been seeing at Winston. And we also wanted to get to any additional questions from the everybody who's joined us tonight. Laura?
I would just quickly say it was very slow going at first. It didn't happen all at once at our school. The team at our school, there's been a lot of growth and closeness over the last few years, which has been amazing. We've had some fantastic administrators that have been really supportive with purchasing resources and also supportive with us exploring structured literacy. So that has sort of taken it from just a few of us digging into this to it starting to gradually spread out. And this summer has been particularly exciting because of all of our colleagues that are doing this Big Dippers course together. And for me in particular, it's exciting because having that shared knowledge and shared language with your staff when you're talking about kids that you're working with and what they're struggling with, what they're succeeding with, and all of that. It's very exciting to me. I'm looking forward to going back to work in September and being able to just share together as a staff this language. Yeah, Hayley and I this past year had, and Emily, we all just gather and get so excited and emotional about our kids and their progress and some silly thing that we've taught them that they're now the kids are passionate about this morpheme. Yeah, that's all.
That's amazing. You guys are all so exciting and enthusiastic, and I'm so glad that you joined us for the panel discussion tonight. But I want to leave a little bit of time. I think I had one more question I was going to ask you, but instead I'm going to ask Stacy, our volunteer here tonight, if there were any questions that came through the chat that she wanted to ask you guys directly. We've got time for maybe 1 or 2, and then I'd like to move to the breakout rooms.
Okay, so can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, okay. So one question that someone was asking was, I know that a lot of boards, at least my board, was pushing for word walls a lot, and the sound walls are kind of coming through now. So would you recommend using both walls together, or would you recommend just using a sound wall, or where would you go with that type of idea? That can be for anyone.
Anyone can jump in there.
Yeah.
I was never good at using a word wall. So I was never good at using a word wall. So I didn't really miss it when I stopped. I sometimes will have a word worm where the kids can move the words around, so they're not alphabetized, they're not in any order, but they tend to be sort of irregular words that we've had to learn. But because I'm teaching my children to decode, they don't need it in the same way. They don't need to have all these words on display all the time, because they actually can sound out as they go. So they can sound out to read and they can sound out to spell. And I don't find that I need it as much. And a sound wall, I have done and not done. Again, because we review every single day, all of the kids have a really good command of the sounds that we've learned. And so sometimes when I get into teaching more complex code, so like vowel teams and some trickier sounds and some things that we can use different spelling patterns for, I sometimes will move toward a sound wall at that point, but I don't always find I need it in kindergarten. Hayley?
Yeah, I wasn't good at using a word wall either. I found it was always really hard for the kids to navigate. And so I often will train my kids to really use the resources in the room. So if we have posters that we've made together, either in math or in language or whatever, I encourage them to go over and I'll tell them, you know, where to find it and see how they go. The sound walls, I've kind of done makeshift. Like I haven't really bought in yet, and I think that's again one of those things that, like, will I do it? I don't know. Maybe that's the small change I will be making soon, but I haven't yet. I did a red word wall. So the red words are the non-decodable words that you cannot sound out, that don't follow the code rules. So we would add to the red words. And so that became something when they were doing their writing. If we were editing, I'd say, oh, are all your red words spelled correctly? And then they'd go to the red word wall and they'd look and they'd try and figure out what they needed to fix. We did, I kind of introduced each long vowel sound. Long A, here's long AY, when do we use AY, when do we use AI? And then I would do a long A poster that I just kind of made and gave examples of. So I haven't done that yet, but it's something, if you think you're going to use it and you want to give it a go, give it a go. That's kind of how if you feel like you're going to use it, I just find wall space so valuable. And so I just don't, we have a lot of windows in our room, so we don't have a lot of wall space. So it's kind of at a premium, that's all. It's a nice problem to have, I guess, with all the natural light.
Did you want to jump in there on that one, Laura?
No, I'm good.
You're good.